Tokyo to Taipei. Taiwan's president rallies support from young Japanese lawmakers for inclusion in regional trade blocs. Mariupol's last stand. Russian forces storm a steel plant sheltering civilians in the besieged Ukrainian port city. Testing times. Frustrations in Taiwan grow over COVID guidelines and a shortage of testing kits.
I'm Rick Lau for TaiwanPlus, here in the indigenous community of Shuhai, which was integral to Taiwan's first domestically produced rocket launch, a launch that ultimately failed. I've got a report on how and why this small village became part of Taiwan's space-age ambitions.
A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen is pushing for Japan's support in the country's inclusion in a massive regional trade bloc. Tsai Ing-wen met with visiting youth members of Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party on Thursday. Taiwan's entry into the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, or the CPTPP, has been a focus of Taiwan-Japan relations in recent years. The countries do not have official diplomatic ties, but the LDP Youth Division sends delegations to Taiwan, including sitting lawmakers. Many of the Youth Division's previous heads have gone on to serve in high positions, including current Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and his predecessor.
未来我们会持续完善法规跟市场的措施，全力争取加入 CPTPP。在这里也要请各位议员朋友继续支持台湾的国际参与。
To discuss the significance of this trip for Taiwan-Japan relations, I spoke with Professor Guo Yuren, an expert in Japanese foreign policy and US-Japan relations at National Sun Yat-sen University here in Taiwan.
I believe the visit of this delegation to Taiwan from the Youth Division of Japanese ruling party, LDP, is actually very timely, right after the outbreak of Ukraine war, and not to mention in this December, end of this year, Japan is going to revise its three very important national security documents.
How has Ukraine changed the security situation for Japan?
This kind of fear of imminent threat from China got escalated with the outbreak of Ukraine war. China's bold action surrounding both Taiwan and Japan. And not to mention, China has been observing and also learning from the experience of Ukraine war. And with the kickoff of Xi Jinping's third term, end of this year, that's the mutual concern and worry for both Taiwan and Japan that Xi Jinping might take, bold military action against Japan or against Taiwan.
How does Taiwan fit into the picture for Japan in terms of its security?
Geographically, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to separate this security relation between Taiwan and Japan. And number two, Taiwan lies in the very center of First Island chain, which is a very important defending line for both US and Japan in the Pacific. Two US bases at Okinawa, they function as the rapid readiness forces for Taiwanese military in case of Chinese invasion, and also it functions as a hub to host or to collaborate military forces among US, Japan, and Taiwan. So it's really not the meaning, security meaning from Taiwan to Japan or Japan to Taiwan, one-way street. It's mutual.
Taiwan's Defense Ministry has faced questions in the legislature about the overall combat readiness of the country. Lawmakers focused on the newly published Civil Defense Guidebook. The guide was first released last month to address the needs of the public in case of emergencies, including war. It has QR codes that link to the locations of air defense shelters and information about what to do in case of a power or water outage. Lawmakers questioned the effectiveness of the handbook in a time of crisis. They said it would be difficult to access the links if internet connections are down. The invasion of Ukraine has now reached its 71st day. After more than 300 civilians were evacuated from a bomb-damaged steel mill in Mariupol, the Russian military has continued its assault to defeat the city's last resistance fighters. The European Union has proposed its 6th round of sanctions targeting high-ranking Russian officials, banks and oil. Bing Wang has more.
Clouds of smoke billow over the steel plant in the besieged city of Mariupol after an assault by Russian forces. This is the last pocket of resistance for Ukrainian fighters. So far, joint UN and Red Cross efforts have successfully evacuated 344 civilians. But the mayor of Mariupol says there are hundreds more, including children still trapped, sheltering in tunnels underneath the steelworks.
Там також є діти, які чекають на цей порятунок. Там більше 30 дітей, які чекають, що розпочнеться нова переговорна процедура і нова евакуаційна місія. Тому треба сьогодні також єднатися в міжнародному суспільстві заради порятунку життя.
Russia promised to implement a 3-day ceasefire beginning Thursday to allow for more evacuations. While aiming to take the last Ukrainian stronghold in Mariupol, Russia has also intensified attacks on railways supplying Ukrainian forces.
США и их союзники по НАТО продолжают накачивать Украину оружием. Отмечу, что любой транспорт Североатлантического альянса, прибывший на территорию страны с вооружением или материальными средствами для нужд украинских вооруженных сил, рассматривается нами как законная цель для поражения.
As Russia attempts to shut off the flow of supplies to Ukraine, the European Union proposed a 6th round of sanctions, the toughest one yet, to be imposed on Russian oil, high-ranking military officers, state broadcasters, and several banks, including Russia's largest Sberbank.
We finally de-SWIFT Sberbank. Sberbank is the largest Russian bank. It holds round about 37% of the whole banking sector. And we will also de-SWIFT two other major banks in Russia. By that, we hit banks that are systemically critical to the Russian financial system and Putin's ability to wage destruction.
The latest round of EU sanctions hopes to cut off Russia's funding to relieve Ukraine from the constant shelling and the rising number of casualties it has suffered since the start of the war. Chris Ma and Bing Wang for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's COVID wave hit new heights on Thursday, with more than 30,000 new cases and 5 deaths. But as the numbers grow, so is the frustration of many who are trying to comply with government guidelines. Local health departments are flooded with people who need to prove they have been in quarantine. And as John Van Trieste reports, a shortage of test kits is also raising concerns.
Across Taiwan, local health departments are being swamped. They're facing long lines of people, not seeking COVID treatment, but needing proof for work or school that they've been in quarantine.
申请居隔单是基本上没有任何联系办法，因为电话打不通，然后你也收不到任何纸本。对，因为现在公司是没有解隔通知，他不让你进去。
Health departments are struggling to handle the volume of requests.
其实每个人都是超时工作，但其实即便如此，我们在超时工作上没有抱怨，但比较抱怨就是说，能不能给我们一个好用的系统，能一些比较聪明的系统来取代我们需要大量人工处理，那效率不好的这个状况。
Long lines are also forming outside pharmacies, where COVID test kits have become a hot commodity.
比如说2点购买，大概12点多就有人在排了，但是大概半小时大概全部卖完。
Some unscrupulous businesses have moved in to meet demand. One Taichung company was caught after putting over 200,000 unapproved test kits on the market. There are also reports of people reselling kits for a profit, despite police warning that doing so carries a fine of up to $34,000. The government is set to release more of its rationed test kits on May 15th in an effort to bring an end to the profiteering and the long lines. Klein Wong and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
2,000 doses of Pfizer vaccines earmarked for children have arrived in Taiwan. The latest batch will initially be used for testing. 770,000 more doses will arrive in a week. Taiwan began vaccinating children between the ages of 6 and 11 with the Moderna brand on Monday. The Central Epidemic Command Center, or CECC, has expanded its monitoring system to better track the effects of the vaccine on children.
在我们疾管家的界面来申请加入孩童接种疫苗之后的一个不良反应的一个资料来做进行安全性的监测。
Coming up, with abortion rights in the US hanging in the balance, we find out where Taiwan stands when it comes to a woman's right to choose. Details after the break.
December and January is eel season here in Taiwan, so these little towns here pop up when the baby eels are caught. So he's going in and we're going to take a look at how he does this. The waves are a little big today. Oh, Jesus Christ. Let's go take a look and see if we caught any. Oh, there's one. 哇，很难抓，很难抓。哇，他挑得很厉害。
Thanks for watching Taiwan Plus. For more great stories from here in Taiwan and around the world, please download the Taiwan Plus app.
Welcome back. You're watching Taiwan Plus News. Political leaders around the world have reacted strongly to the news that the US Supreme Court may be about to reverse the law protecting abortion rights. Abortion rights! Now! Protests broke out in parts of the United States following a leak of the court's draft opinion in favor of overturning the landmark case Roe versus Wade. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said, quote, "The right to choose is a woman's right and a woman's right alone." Similar statements of support came from Scotland, Spain and other parts of Europe. 24 countries in the world have total bans on abortion. Taiwan is one of 72 countries that permits abortion before a certain point in the pregnancy. But as Huang Xuying, the chair of Taiwan's Women's Link, told me, the laws here still impose limitations on a woman's right to choose.
It's not enacted for women's health or women's need, but we do have a law that let women be able to choose to have abortion. But when a married woman want to have abortion, you have to get the consent from your husband, and this is not right. I think it's only woman knows the best if it's good for her or not the husband. And second, women is the one who will bear the fetus. So he should have the right to decide what her body wants to be, not the husband. Thirdly, women, pregnancy and childbirth has risk. Women should have the right to refuse to those risks.
And in terms of your campaigning, is anyone listening?
In 2007, I actually revised the law, want to repeal the husband's consent. And at that time, the religious group, they organized and formed alliance. And they have a lot of resources, human resources, monetary resources. And they will lobby, they will go to the legislation and lobby those legislators. And also from the religion side, they will have their believers to call us office against us. And so at that time we were so frightened. So we revise the law, then those religious groups are coming out, and so we don't know what's going to be changed.
Lockdown measures in Beijing are set to continue indefinitely as China's capital battles its worst COVID outbreak since the pandemic began. 3.5 million people in the Chaojiang district have been instructed to work from home. 60 subway stations have been shut down and dozens of bus lines have stopped operating in high-risk areas. China has maintained a COVID-zero strategy despite fears it could wreak havoc on the world's second-largest economy. 22 million people live in Beijing, but according to official numbers, only 42 symptomatic cases were reported on Wednesday. In China's financial hub of Shanghai, 2.5 million people are still unable to leave their homes as authorities struggle to exit a 5-week lockdown. Twitter's soon-to-be new owner, Elon Musk, says businesses and governments may need to pay a, quote, slight fee to use the service in the future. It's all part of a push to increase revenue. The platform currently lags behind rivals like Meta's Facebook. Musk said Twitter would always be free for casual users. He says he is looking for ways to monetize tweets that go viral. The Tesla and SpaceX founder last week agreed a deal to buy Twitter for $44 billion. Since then, the world's richest man has been teasing the public over his plans for the company. The U.S. state of New Mexico is battling 7 wildfires, with a few of those combining to create a massive inferno. Authorities say the blaze is consuming the largest area in the state in over 30 years. Over 1,000 firefighters have mobilized to contain the fires, which have burned almost 230,000 acres, or roughly the size of the whole of Hong Kong. Thousands of people have been evacuated since the fires started in early April. According to state officials, New Mexico has been under a prolonged drought, and more land has been scorched this year than in the past 2 years combined. There are dozens of wildfires burning across the southwestern part of the U.S. The Japanese Space Agency has teamed up with a toy maker to develop its latest mini lunar exploration robot. Sora-Q is the product of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA, and toy company Tomy. The small round robot weighs only 250 grams and it is designed specially to adapt to the lunar environment. It is made using materials that can endure the harsh temperature fluctuations of the moon. And it also has 2 wheels that allow it to move freely on powdery sand. The developers are planning to send the robot to the moon next year and hope this mission will inspire the nation's children to look to the stars. Well, back down to earth in Taiwan, the first domestically produced rocket failed to launch this week in the southern city of Pingdong. But for a small indigenous village which rented the land to the Ministry of Science and Technology, it was still an uplifting moment. Rick Glowett reports.
This is Shuhai, a small indigenous Taiwanese community on the island's windswept southeast coast. Most of the people here are Paiwan, a name that means they come from heaven. For a few days this month, the rural village of only 450 people had a new neighbour. A rocket set to be the first step in Taiwan's multi-million-dollar space-age ambitions. But bad weather got in the way of liftoff. The rocket was meant to be launched from the shoreline behind me. It required a wide open space, a safe distance from large towns and cities. But this land belongs to the local indigenous ethnic Paiwan people. They've lived here for millennia. And this indigenous land is protected by Taiwan law. The Ministry of Science and Technology required the local community's permission before they could plan a launch. Town residents held a referendum on the issue last year, with 85 out of 112 households opting to be part of this pioneering project.
高科技这个太空这一块，我们有进驻在我们部落，当然说我们是很欢迎了希望也是趁着这样的一个产业为我们部落 不管是学校学子方面也当然是提升我们的能见度了。
And for a few days, this small town was buzzing with scientists, rocket experts, and journalists, a boon to the local economy.
当然有人进进出出，当然我们生意会比较好一点啊，对不对？没有人就没有人买啊。
But unseasonably strong wind and heavy rain on launch day forced engineers to take the rocket back to their centre for repair. There's no guarantee when or where the next launch will take place.
成功是骄傲的好感觉啊，就是这样嘛。你发射的好，我就是台湾学生做得很好这是我们国家的经济没有什么。
But what should have been a moment of pride for the country was scuppered by wind and rain, forcing Taiwan and the people of Zhuhai to wait for another chance to reach for the heavens. Patrick Chen and Rick Glowett in Pingdong County for TaiwanPlus.
Have a look at the shoes on your feet. Chances are good that they were mass-produced, but there are still stores in Taiwan that are making them by hand. Today we take you to a shop in Taipei that's still making traditional embroidered shoes the old-fashioned way.
绣花鞋呢，其实在以前的年代，其实大部分会是应该是算比较有钱人的定义在穿的，因为它毕竟是手工鞋。因为台湾那时候比较没有钱，所以大部分人可能会是穿着木屐啊，或者是一些草鞋之类。可是绣花鞋，因为它是手工鞋，它又上面有做刺绣这种点缀，所以它的价格会比较高。所以在那一年头的话，可能多人会说是一个有钱的老太太啊、外省人在穿的。我叫做陈伟，我是小花园的第4代。那小花园目前到台湾已经有81年了。那我接手这个品牌大概10年多。小花园呢，大概是我曾祖父在上海那时候设立。那时候他因为那时候就是不是一个大公司，他就是一个私人的就是鞋匠。那他都是会帮一些富太太官小姐去后花园里面去制手工做鞋。那随着时代的变迁，那我的第2代他们来到了台湾，因为不晓得做什么，可是想说家里因为是做鞋的，那就在台湾生根了以后，我们就以绣花鞋、手工鞋这个继续做传承。这个是我们家最传统的绣花鞋。那最传统的绣花鞋，它会有几个不同的特色，跟现在一样。那我们可以看到，它这个是缎面的。它那时候如果讲究一点，我们可能会用蚕丝布。那它上面的绣线呢，会是蚕丝线。那它这个会是手工艺的制作方法，会是用梳绣的方法。所以你可以看它的层次变化会非常多，跟它仔细观看它的线条的那个细腻度会非常够。以这种纯手工的绣花鞋，这个刺绣要看图形的难易度。那这种比较难的话，它可能一天只会绣到2到3双，因为一双鞋是2只脚嘛，所以它一次就大概是2到3双的速度。那绣花鞋在以前因为还没有橡胶底的时候，我们会用皮底，所以那是要现在看到很多高级鞋，现在其实也会像皮革大底。但是因为随着那个科技的发达，橡胶的发明，再加上因为台湾的瓷砖地比较多，所以我们后来通通改成橡胶的底。所以这种皮底的话，后来就没有再生产了。其实最早的时候，大概是1人工厂，大概就是我外曾祖父那时候，他可能就是背着他的行囊，像修鞋的鞋匠一样，去他们的有钱人家里面去做手工鞋的制作。那到来台湾以后，其实他就已经有点分工的概念，所以我们那时候家里会有一群师傅，他是绣花跟制鞋是分两边不同的师傅做，所以我们的鞋子会是先从绣花去做起，绣花整个鞋面做完以后，才会交给制鞋的师傅。我们家的制鞋师傅呢，目前最年轻的都是60多岁，那他们可能从年轻的时候就会开始在做同一行，所以你可以看到他们的速度其实是非常快，就是熟能生巧。因为我们的量不是那么大，如果是交给机器去解帮的话，那它的整个制作的过程会不符合我们现在的经济成本，所以我们会坚持每一双鞋都是手工制作。手工制作就可以让鞋子会更有自己的特色跟更好穿。以前我们的总要的聚落都是在西门町那个地方，那到了前3年以后，因为我们会想要换一个感觉，来到了大稻埕的话，发现大稻埕其实很适合我们这边的一些氛围，所以我们后来决定在这边落脚。那因为房租等等的问题，所以我们去年就结束西门町的生意， 现在目前都以大稻埕为主要的据点。我们家现在目前的主要的课程还是以台湾人为主，那我们还会有3层是日本课。那日本课会很喜欢绣花鞋，是它因为它有代表台湾的一种精神。来到大稻埕以后，我们会结合这边的元素去做一些新产品的开发，因为这边是主要拜月老嘛，月老的话会有给红线，那我们会做一个红线包给一些年轻人在求红线的时候，他可以做一个收藏。那我们会结合城隍庙办一些活动，像我们做了一些城隍包啊这样子，来增添说除了我们是做刺绣的艺术，我们也结合当地的色彩。我觉得绣花鞋对我来意义应该就是我对长辈的纪念，因为家人从我小时候看到经营，其实绣花鞋是以台湾来讲，它是真的是传统产业。那从以前我很小的时候看到它很风光，到中途的落下啊，到现在我们重新转型，让它在不能说走得很好，但是现在平稳。但是对我来讲，就是好像在坚守老人家那一份传承，就是他最重视跟心爱的东西，我希望我能把它保留下去，传承给下面的人。
Thanks for watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Finally today, we leave you with images of Star Wars fans celebrating May the 4th in New York. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, please download the TaiwanPlus app. Stay safe and see you next time.